Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel, so if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land with ILTV, have no worries. It's time for our new show this week in Israel, where we'll give you the scoop on everything you need to know about the last 7 days right from Tel Aviv. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, here to keep you informed.
After years of publicly pushing for the dissolving of the JCPOA Iranian nuclear deal, the United States under President Trump finally listened and pulled out. But now it appears that Israel may have a bit of buyer's remorse. According to Haaretz's report, a foreign ministry document detailing goals for the coming year says that, quote, efforts for 2019 should focus on pressuring for an improved agreement that will address the flaws of the old deal, end quote. This means essentially that Israel now supports the idea of negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran. It's a clear detachment from the old modus operandi in which the Israeli government has been focusing on fixing or nixing the deal, emphasis on nixing. In 2018, the goals included, quote, establishing red lines and preventing Iran from making effective progress in its nuclear program, first and foremost with regard to the nuclear agreement, end quote. Prime Minister Netanyahu also gave speeches to the United States Congress, to public, to the internet, and to President Trump specifically, calling to cancel the deal. Just a few months ago, there was even a big reveal of thousands of documents that Israel smuggled out of Iran. But now, instead of concerning itself solely with preventative methods against Iran, Israel will be looking to diversify those that Israel relies on, including strengthening ties with Russia. Iran, on the other hand, has made it clear that they aren't looking to renegotiate. In fact, despite the inner turmoil the country is currently experiencing, Iran has reportedly continued to uphold its part in the deal, while ratcheting up its rhetoric. An Iranian Atomic Energy Organization official told Iran media that, quote, we are at a considerably more advanced status than when we signed the deal. The country is moving ahead in nuclear activities at a favorable pace, and we will not return to previous levels if our counterparts leave the JCPOA, but will instead reach even more advanced levels, end quote.
Well, confirming the reports of the last few days, the Trump administration has just announced that the United States will halt all funds to the UNRWA, the UN's chief Palestinian refugee agency. Now, for the time being, the White House will continue allowing regional allies to continue dispersing their funds to UNRWA, but clearly the long-term goal of this seems to be the eventual and total dismantling of the UN's Palestinian agency altogether in the near future.
Palestinians have condemned this move of the Trump administration. For them, it throws the fate of some 5 million regional Palestinians, many of whom have lived in refugee camps their entire lives in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Gaza, and the West Bank, into total jeopardy. Palestinian leaders say they're preparing to take this matter to the UN for a global resolution. Israeli leaders, however, have largely praised the White House for halting funds to an agency they claim has distorted its original goal of helping the Palestinians. Many have accused UNRWA of providing a smokescreen for anti-Israel resistance or even terror.
I suggest a gradual conversion of all funds going to UNRWA to other agencies that deal with the question of refugees and actually have criteria. This will not have negative effects. It will have positive effects, because the perpetuation of the dream of bringing the descendants of refugees back to Jaffa is what sustains this conflict.
European leaders have responded to this news by saying that although UNRWA may indeed be imperfect, it remains the only agency dedicated to helping millions of Palestinians, the offspring of over 250,000 who were expelled from Israel following the 1948 Independence War. This population today receives a somewhat unique status as refugees despite being in its second or third generation since that original expulsion. For many, this budget cut is the first sign that America may be seeking to block the Palestinians' self-proclaimed right of return to immigrate back to their original descendants' homes in modern-day Israel. Some say this is almost identical to the Jewish right of return that resulted in the creation of the modern-day state of Israel. But for Israeli leaders, this creates an existential paradox, because the influx of millions of Palestinians into the country would mean the end of the Jewish majority nation-state they intended. But make no mistake, Trump's decision is nothing short of a very significant policy shift, one whose implications are still being weighed.
Reports coming in now of turmoil and violence in the West Bank. Yesterday, Israeli forces clashed with Palestinian riders as they proceeded to demolish a series of Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem. Mere hours later, in a separate incident, a Palestinian was shot dead after allegedly approaching IDF troops with a knife in hand.
This took place at a well-known army checkpoint inside the Palestinian West Bank near the Kiryat Arba settlement. According to the military statement, an IDF soldier immediately neutralized the potential assailant when he saw him approach, killing him on the spot. Witnesses at the scene, however, report a significantly different series of events. One Palestinian man who was allegedly there when the incident took place says that an armed Jewish settler was the one who opened fire on the suspect, a rather different account than the IDF's official statement on the matter.
فور وصولي للمكان سمعت ضوء 4 رصاصات. نظرت إلى الشارع خلفي وجدت جثمان الشهيد وائل ملقى على الأرض. طبعا الذي أطلق النار على الشهيد وائل هو مستوطن مر من المكان بسرعة عالية وأوقف السيارة بشكل مباشر وأطلق الرصاص.
This incident occurred just a few hours after Israeli forces demolished 4 Palestinian homes in the village of Al-Walajah, a village which uniquely straddles the green line separating Israel from the Palestinian West Bank. A controversial court decision declared that some of the homes in this village were illegally built and slated them to be evicted and demolished. But Palestinian residents argue that given the village's close proximity to Jerusalem, this is a political effort to wipe out Palestinian presence altogether. Israeli media recently reported that the Jerusalem municipality indeed had begun plans to convert this new territory into a national park. For now, evicted Palestinians say they intend to clean up the rubble and continue living in what's left of their homes, saying that they have nowhere else to go.
A fresh round of airstrikes have just been reported across various provinces in northern Syria. Witnesses say they saw Israeli aircraft at the scene of the bombings, which at this time have left approximately 3 people dead. And as usual with army policy, Israel has neither confirmed nor denied any involvement. But having said that, this alleged attack took place just a few hours after Israel did confirm that it had carried out some 200 bombings in Syria over the last 2 years.
רק כרגע פורסם בשם מקורות צבאיים, לכן גם אני יכול לצטט שישראל פעלה בשנתיים האחרונות למעלה מ-200 פעם באופן צבאי בסוריה עצמה. תבינו את משמעות הדבר הזה מבחינת שמירת הקו האדום, מניעת אותם דברים שאיראן עשתה, עושה ומנסה לעשות מול ישראל מסוריה בעצמה.
This admission comes from Israel's own intelligence minister, Israel Katz, addressing a crowd at IDC Herzliya's Conference for International Counterterrorism. The statement is a rare confirmation of what most have widely assumed, that the army has conducted regular and all-encompassing strikes throughout Syria in order to protect its own interests. This latest alleged airstrike in Syria took place in the early morning hours in the northwest Syrian town of Wadi al-Uyun. Now, notably, it doesn't appear as though any specific military compounds were the target here. Having said that, this region has been linked to a purported missile factory and is also believed to be the location of at least one significant Syrian scientific research center. Syria media reported that anti-air defense batteries scrambled just in time to block a lot of the alleged airstrikes, but at the same time, many missiles do seem to have reached their targets. Video and photo evidence has quickly surfaced on social media showing the effects of the blasts. A mix of Syrian and Iranian nationals are said to have been injured in these alleged airstrikes. All right, now following President Trump's decision to halt all funding to the Palestinians' chief UN refugee agency, the White House has apparently floated another contentious idea. Trump officials reportedly asked Jordan and Palestinian leaders to consider creating a joint Palestinian-Jordanian confederation, essentially absorbing the West Bank into Jordan. The idea was immediately shot down by both sides. This idea has been at least discussed as possible peace plans since the 1980s, but never truly pitched until now. Jordanian leaders see the absorption of millions of Palestinians, most of whom exist in a state of poverty, as a logistical and existential impossibility. On top of this, both Palestinian and Jordanian officials say that this idea unfairly removes Israel's responsibility from the matter, especially with no clear path to Israeli-Palestinian peace or borders in place. But Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has just suggested a different possibility. During a visit with Israeli peace activists, Abbas told the room that he would be willing to consider such a confederation if it was a trio that included Israel as well. This is the first major time Abbas has suggested any kind of alternative to a two-state solution. Abbas apparently pitched this idea to Trump's Middle East envoy during their trip to the region last year. But given the Trump administration's recent freezing of all funds to UNRWA, Palestinians are now skeptical that Trump is seeking a peaceful solution to the conflict to begin with. In a rare move, the PA has just dispatched an intelligence team to Washington, D.C. in an effort to understand what else the United States may have in store for the Palestinians. Aside from freezing all funds to UNRWA, the United States does currently send aid money to keep Israeli-Palestinian security measures in place. This is one of the rare places where Israelis and Palestinians actually cooperate on a regular basis. If those systems were to collapse as well, both sides recognize that the danger to both Israelis and Palestinians would likely spike. Yesterday marked the first ever visit by a Philippine leader to the state of Israel. President Rodrigo Duterte will spend the next several days meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, visiting the Holocaust Memorial, and signing a massive new oil deal. But the controversial leader has already set off a minor storm. Just mere hours after touching down, President Duterte addressed a room of Filipino foreign workers in Israel and publicly defended a rape joke that he made as freedom of speech.
Duterte infamously made a speech on live television not long ago, saying that there would be many rape cases in one of his cities if there were many beautiful women in it. This apparent attempt at humor was met with bitter disgust both domestically and abroad. It's unclear why he felt the need to bring it up at all or defend it here in Israel. But these words come amidst growing concerns that Israeli leaders are continuing to embrace foreign presidents with disturbing histories of human rights violations and sometimes even anti-Semitism. For many, President Duterte is the sum of all those concerns in one. In 2016, he proudly compared himself to Adolf Hitler in his mission to exterminate drug dealers from the Philippines. Further to that, Duterte's police force have been accused of murdering upwards of thousands of innocent poor people in execution-style killings under the banner of a fake drug war. Despite these criticisms, Israeli leaders have welcomed Duterte to the country with open arms. In celebration of this visit, the Foreign Ministry announced the appointment of a new Israeli ambassador to the Philippines, Rafael Harpaz. While Prime Minister Netanyahu has indeed prioritized foreign trips in an effort to find support for the Jewish state abroad, the true bottom line here may be strictly business. Last year, the Philippines began investing major dollars in Israeli military technology. Duterte will spend his time here overseeing the finalization of an oil deal and will also likely be shopping for more Israeli-made weapons. In 1939, the Philippines was one of the few countries to host an open-door policy in an attempt to give Jews an escape from the Nazis. Today, more than 70 years later, Duterte's visit to the Holocaust Memorial in Israel will be seen by some as a beacon of hope and by others as a dark warning of things yet to come.
Juana Del Rey has just delivered some very bad news for her Israeli fans. The pop star was originally set to headline the country's Meteor Festival this week, defying BDS calls for a cultural boycott of the state of Israel. Well, in a stunning turnaround, Del Rey has just announced that indeed she is calling off her Holy Land performance altogether. According to her, it's because she was unable to schedule a dual show in both Israel and the Palestinian territories. And ILTV's Camille Kadosh is here with all the details. Emmanuel, I have a feeling you're very upset.
I'm very upset about this, actually. I have to let you know that this is just crazy. I didn't see this going in this direction in the slightest. I thought her original post was, first of all, beautifully written. And so,
which said what? She said originally...
She basically was saying that, just because she comes and performs in Israel doesn't mean that she supports the government, doesn't mean that she supports, Bibi Netanyahu. It doesn't mean anything. It means that she's coming and feeding her fans with the music that they all wish that, they could hear live. And I think that that's fair enough to come here and to perform for her fans and try to put politics aside. However, over the weekend, I was informed of a very sad turn of events, like you said, where she just simply canceled. And of course, there's so much going on. There's the BDS campaign that's going against her, Lana Don't Go, hashtag on Twitter. What isn't there? You know what I mean? There's posters. The people are harassing her via every social media. And these posters are all over Israel. So it really does make me sad that now she canceled it.
Right. And look, it's very complicated because it's... I wouldn't say she simply canceled because in her statement she canceled and said, I regret to something along the lines of, I regret to inform my fans in both Israel and the Palestinian territories, I was unable to have enough time to set a concert in both, which was what that original statement said when she defended her choice to come.
Yes.
Now that in itself has been both criticism because some say, oh, you had plenty of time. It was you who, like I think the Meteor Festival said, it was you who decided to come and you had the time and the autonomy to make that concert happen.
And that's what she also mentioned. She also said, no, we booked this, we're coming. You know what I mean? In her original statement, that's what it said. We booked this, of course we're going to be here. And she'll make the effort to go to Palestinian territories and perform for both sides. You know what I mean? I think the BDS movement got the best of her, and
You think this is BDS?
Yes, 100%. And I don't say this because I have facts, and I don't say this because she came out blatantly and saying this, but people get pressured, and it's a lot of pressure. Imagine having this poster coming around and you seeing your face along with all those things saying Lana Don't Go. And she's just one out of 9 previous ones, not including her, that have already canceled. DJ Python came out with a statement being like, I wasn't informed enough. After talking to 2 of my friends, here's the thing. After doing my research, I've come to the conclusion that I wasn't informed enough, and now I'm not going to go. But instead, I'm going to do a fundraiser to support BDS, to donate to BDS. So I don't know what information he was told or what information he, felt like he researched enough, but to go and do 180, like planning on coming to Israel and then go from that to canceling to donating to BDS, doesn't add up.
Sure,
it really doesn't.
It's, look, on one hand, what are arts and culture and music and film, if not a way to extend a message of peace that goes beyond politics? Having said that, this was an interesting conundrum for me, because as soon as she made a statement that said, hey, I'm not coming, it's not a political thing, that statement was politicized by both sides, by
100%.
BDS and by pro-government said, who said, oh, you are coming.
Yes, 100%.
And so that means that, in a way, there's a catch-22, because Lana Del Rey can't come truly non-politically.
Agreed.
Even by saying it's not political, suddenly it's political.
Agreed.
And that's tough for any artist.
Yes, she came out with something in her original statement that I really think stuck out with a lot of people. She said, I perform in California all the time, and I do not support our president, Donald Trump. So why can't I perform somewhere else? Which is so true, and a lot of artists need to look at it like that. Music is universal. Exactly. They're coming here for their fans, which are international, which have no boundaries and have no political agenda when they come to your concert. They want to come hear your music, and they want to come hear your talent, and it's really unfortunate that this is how it ended.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Israeli and Palestinian fans are just disappointed not to see her come play at all.
And the Meteor Festival in general. Everyone was really looking forward to all these artists, and it really is upsetting.
Bad news, bad day for you, Manuel.
Bad day for all of us now.
Sorry
yes, thank you.
Manuel, thanks for coming.
Thanks.
Of course. Israel's own skyways are about to get very congested during the busiest time of the season. That's because Russia is preparing to begin a massive military drill around the Mediterranean region. Israel's airport authority predicts that these exercises will likely require massive reorienting of hundreds of Israeli flights, with big delays all but expected. The Russian Navy will commence its wide-scale military exercises in Mediterranean waters sometime later this week, and it's expected to conclude them this Saturday. Now, this time frame, however, coincides directly with perhaps one of the busiest travel occasions on the Israeli calendar, as it falls mere days before the Rosh Hashanah New Year holiday. Typically, this is a day when families travel far and wide to celebrate their new year, and this year, Rosh Hashanah falls right against a weekend, giving people an extra long weekend holiday to take off from work. Well, flight officials say that unfortunately those travel plans may very well feel the wrath of Russia's military exercises that impact. The drill will engage a fleet of Russian ships and aircraft for joint maneuvers. Needless to say, you can expect long wait times with planes delayed on the runways and a domino effect of delays for longer international journeys if you've got connections. Now, before this drill was announced, authorities expected a massive influx of some 650 flights on this Thursday alone. Travelers headed either to or from Israel this weekend may want to pack an extra book just in case the wait is long. A major victory just now for Israeli athletes competing in the International Forum. Ahead of the Abu Dhabi Grand Slam Judo tournament next month, the United Arab Emirates has announced that this year all athletes will be welcomed to compete in a fair and equal arena, a very significant turnaround from past years when Israeli athletes were either not allowed to present their flag or worse, weren't allowed to compete at all.
For many, this announcement is a long time coming. Sports and culture is typically seen as one of the few places where bridges for peace can be built overcoming politics, which is why the UAE's past exclusion or discrimination of Israeli athletes from the world of judo has been so especially painful. Officially, the UAE and Israel have no formal ties, nor does the Emirates officially recognize Israel's right to exist. Now, having said that, it's practically an open secret that the two nations have widely engaged in both security and business relations, with many Israelis traveling freely to and from the UAE in recent years. In the sports arena, however, the UAE has resisted pressure to formally welcome Israelis with open arms, most likely due to the participation of other Arab nations with less favorable Israeli ties. Iranian athletes, for example, have often faced government pressure to refuse from competing against Israeli opponents to begin with, but that behavior, as well as regional discrimination, has finally reached a breaking point. Last year, the Judo Federation revoked Abu Dhabi's hosting duties for this tournament after officials refused to let Israeli winners play their national anthem or brandish their flag at the medal awarding ceremonies. Well, fortunately, that's looking like a thing of the past now. The UAE Judo Federation has officially announced that this October, all nations will be able to display their national insignia and national anthem, including Israel. So no matter who wins gold, silver, or bronze this October, everyone's a winner with this historic stepping stone for equality.
Okay, sometimes people call Israel something of a baby-crazy country, and I will admit sometimes it does feel like everyone and their neighbor won't stop asking you if and when you're having a baby, or your next baby, or your next 10 babies. Well, to add a little more fodder to that, Israel's Population and Immigration Authority have just announced their official state findings on the most popular baby names of the past year. Drum roll, please.
Coming in at number 1 in the boys category for many years running now is the name Muhammad, followed by Ariel, David, Lavi, Ori, Yosef, Eran, Noam, Daniel, Itai, and finally, Judah. And in the girls category, the heavyweight champion, Tamar, followed by Abigail, Yael, Adele, Noah, Sarah, Shira, Noya, Esther, and Talia. And there you have it, the most popular baby names in Israel for the past year. With the Hebrew New Year of Rosh Hashanah just a weekend away, the country is taking a big look back at the past year. Now, in addition to baby names, the Population Authority has announced statistics on a wide range of family-related info. This year, for example, it turns out that exactly 168,441 babies were born in the country. That is a whole lot of dirty diapers. Over 61,000 marriages were registered, along with nearly 25,000 divorces, and nearly 25,000 immigrants immigrated into the country, up just slightly from last year. Who knows what next year will bring, as long as it's more love, more life, and more prosperity.
Nobody ever said life in Israel was always simple or easy, but according to the Central Bureau of Statistics, at least it's almost always happy. A new study has suggested that nearly 90% of all Israelis living in the country say that they're satisfied with their lives, and that's certainly worth smiling about. With the Hebrew calendar coming to a close and the Rosh Hashanah New Year holiday on the horizon, people are taking a look back at the past year. Well, according to this study, the feedback is almost universally positive. Adding a little icing to the cake is that the report also suggests nearly half of Israelis exercise on a regular basis. As we know, exercise and a healthy lifestyle definitely impacts your overall health and happiness. Now, having said that, though, over a third of Israelis polled do say that they're unhappy with their finances, with a whopping 31% saying that they struggle regularly to pay their bills. Indeed, Israeli cities, Tel Aviv in particular, have often been ranked among the most expensive cities to live in the world. But clearly people aren't letting money stresses impact their outlook on life. But the real proof may be in the pudding. The average lifespan for an Israeli man last year was 84.6 years, with women at 80.7 years. Those are considerably high numbers compared to the rest of the world. Now, life may be better measured in quality versus quantity, but happier people definitely tend to live a bit longer on average anyway. So always look for the bright side of life and don't stop smiling.
That's it for this week's Roundup. Tune in next Friday for our next episode of This Week in Israel. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from Tel Aviv.